Welcome everyone. Welcome to the Hitachi Solutions webinar about moving to the unified interface. I'm Joel Lindstrom, and my role here is I'm a principal architect. I've been with Hitachi for about 13 years now. I'm also a Microsoft Business Applications MVP. Wayne Walton.
Howdy, I'm a senior architect with Hitachi Solutions.
All right, great. So here's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to cover, hopefully, almost everything you need to know about what's coming with the move to unified interface, when you have to make the move, and but also not just you have to move, but why you should be looking forward to this, and what the process is looking like. Then Wayne's going to talk about some other considerations. There's a lot you need to think about. Just moving to unified interface isn't necessarily terribly complicated, but you do need to take into account a number of different things. So let's go ahead and get started. And we will actually be going into the application. If you haven't seen unified interface, we're going to be showing some things that will hopefully help you understand better how it works and what the differences are. So what do you need to know? What do you need to know? Number one, legacy web interface is going away for end users in October. And so what that means is not that the settings area, not that the workflows, some of those areas will still be around, or the settings for those, or the classic UI settings will still be available. But the legacy web interface is going away for end users. And so customers have until September 25th, 2020 to make the move. Many environments that are scheduled earlier than that. This is something that a lot of people didn't know about until the last few weeks, which is there is a portal, this run1.powerappsportal.com, that you can go to see when is my environment going to be updated. So I'm just going to pull that up and just show you kind of what that looks like. I'll click the link. Okay, it's not working for me right now, but you'll go to that website and it will show you your environments and will show you when they're going to be updated. You can also, though, request an exemption for each environment, and you can go up to 30 days, and then you can do another exemption after that. I was on site at a customer's earlier this week, and we checked, and theirs were scheduled for April 1st. So they could push it off to May 1st, and then push it up to June 1st. Beyond that, you would have to call support. The absolutely last date you can do it is September 25th, 2020. The Legacy Outlook client. For users that are totally online, meaning Dynamics and Exchange Online, the COM add-in is going to stop working come September 25th or October 1st, and when you make the move, because you got to remember the Outlook client renders the classic UI forms. So you want to make sure that if you are using that, along with looking at making the move to unified interface, you also look at making the move to the new Outlook app. And there is an FAQ that's pretty good. If you go to this site, and we've shared out the deck here, which you can download after the presentation, that has a lot of great questions and answers. So I would recommend you check that out. So that's really what you want to know. If you've thought you had almost a year to do this, you probably don't. And you really want to start now in evaluating your configuration and planning for making the move. So it is a change, especially if you've been on classic UI a long time, but there's a ton of benefits that you get with this. The user interface is more performant and it is more user-friendly. It's designed with accessibility in mind, especially if you have people who are visually challenged or have disabilities that make dealing with the classic UI hard to do. One of the things that, for example, in classic UI, you really didn't have borders around different things. So things like screen readers sometimes didn't work that well with it. This is designed from the beginning with accessibility in mind. And it's called the unified interface because it's unified across all of the interfaces. On classic UI, we really didn't have just one interface. We had 4 or 5. We had Interactive Service Hub, we had classic web UI, we had Outlook UI, we had mobile, formerly known as Mocha. So it's taking all that and giving us one unified interface. And as mentioned on the slide, there's some exceptions to that. Field service has some specialized needs around things, for mobile, but still the core forms inside the application are unified around this. It's very responsive. It gives you a lot more configuration in areas where we've never been able to configure before. The app for Outlook and the activity pane are 2 great examples, which I'll show you a little bit more about the activity pane in just a bit. It makes certain things much more available, like the related records or the documents are much more available. And as we'll get to later, there's a whole slew of things that have been released every 6 months for the last 2 years that have only worked in unified interface that as a classic UI user, you've been unable to take advantage of. Now that you'll be going to unified interface, there's a number of things that you may want to consider evaluating for not necessarily the day you switch over, but shortly thereafter. So the paradigm of the unified interface is the idea that we shouldn't have multiple interfaces. We should have one interface. And maybe when I'm looking at it on a larger screen, it's more spread out, more columns showing the view. But then as we change the form factor, that form should just adapt and be responsive to the device that we're changing to. And so grids, for example, reflow into cards so that when I'm looking at my phone, same UI, but optimized for the UI that we're working from. Another thing that I really love is the activity timeline. So we've had the social pane, and I sometimes spelled the social pane with an I, as in pain, not P-A-N-E, because it was nice, but it was painful to work with. You had tabs, so if I want to see the notes and I wanted to see the posts and I wanted to see the activities, I would have to switch between all of them. Now we have a single hierarchical timeline that combines them all into one view, but lets us very easily filter. So if I want to view just the notes, or if you want to view just the phone calls, I can do that. And this is only unified interface, but it applies in it appears in all interfaces, whether I'm in the browser or in mobile. I get a similar kind of timeline experience. And just some things to mention about that. It's configurable. So those phone call cards on the classic UI social pane that every customer I worked with said, hey, I'd like to add this custom field to it. And we'd have to say, I'm sorry, you can't customize this. Now the answer is yes, we can customize this. We can change the fields that appear. We can change the sort order. I remember back, several projects where the default on the classic UI social pane was modified on date for sort by. So if somebody went and updated something that caused the modified of a note or activity to be changed from 5 years ago to today, that old note or activity would appear on the top. Now we can customize, not only the sort order, we can customize what shows. The other thing is, I don't want to see letters. I don't use faxes. I don't want to see them in my timeline. Now we can customize it to only show the types of activities that you want to see, and customize what fields display, and customize how it sorts. So it's a much better experience, especially after the October update. They made it much more data dense. Initially, Unified Interface was very spread out, a lot of white space, but as you'll see when I get in there, they made it a lot more data dense, so it's much more it's much more usable. And so now I'm just going to jump over and show you some of the things that I love about Unified Interface that hopefully will help you understand, if you don't yet use it, what some of the things that will really improve your usability. And one thing I should mention on the whole concept of a unified interface, of having the same interface with mobile and desktop, one of the big wins that I've found is training and testing are significantly easier today than they used to be. So let's take training. So it used to be I would have to have a what I call the Jekyll and Hyde kind of training course, where we'd have the people in the office, we would train them on here's how it works when you're on your desktop. Then we'd have the mobile staff who were using it on a tablet, and because that used Mocha, or the old UI that was different, we would have to almost do a totally separate training class. Now we can do one training class, teach them how to do what they do, and whether they're using on a phone, tablet, or a computer, or an Outlook, we can have the same forms, same experience. And then the testing aspect of it, in the past, not so distant past. I'm sorry, my doorbell's going on. In the not so distant past, we would have to do double the testing. We would have to test in the desktop, then we would have to jump over to mobile, test on the mobile, and now, well, you still want to test the form factor. It's much easier because, number one, from the form maker experience, I can preview the form inside of a mobile form factor, and the configuration, the layout, the JavaScript, the business rules are consistent across all clients. And so that's what makes it just great from a testing perspective. So I'm going to highlight a couple of things. For those of you who are used CRM a long time ago in version 4, you remember we had the always visible side navigation sitemap. It's back. We've got I guess, what's good comes back. You've got the side navigation here, which no more horizontal scrolling. When that was introduced in 2013, nobody loved it, and they made it as good as they could. But again, this is much better because I do not have to scroll throughout the application. I don't have to scroll left and right, and I get off of it, and then I lose my place. When I go to a view, what you'll notice is it's not that much different, especially with the Wave 2 update. They've made the views a lot more data dense, so it kind of feels like you're still in classic UI for what it's good for. You still got the alphabet selectors down on the bottom. You've got all your main buttons, all those things that were limitations of unified interface when it came out about a year and a half ago are no longer limitations. You can run reports, you can do everything you can do, plus a few more things like this Teams collaboration button. So that's one thing to keep in mind. We got the hierarchy visualization, just like you did in classic UI. When I go to a record, one thing to mention, back in classic UI, we had the up and down buttons to scroll up and down the view. Now we have the pop-out view where we can go in context to where we're going, and if we want to say go down a list of accounts or phone calls or something, I can easily click down the list. So I'm not losing anything in making the move to unified interface from those usability pieces. I mentioned the timeline. Now I have the filter pane showing here, so that's taking up a bit more real estate than it would have to. You can also have that not displayed. But you can see how I don't have the tabs on the top. I have the one hierarchical view, the timeline here, and things like the attachments, I can easily get to them, and I can sort it, I can filter it, very easily. I just want to highlight the tabs. So in CRM 2011, the tabs went away, and we went to a long scrolling form that had tabs, but they weren't really separating things on the form. This is one of the things you'll want to revisit when you get to the unified interface, because now I think tabs have a lot more value, and they let us make the forms less intimidating to people. That's the common feedback I get, is this feels much easier and less intimidating because it's not giving me a mile-long form to scroll up and down. It's giving me, if I just need the basic information, I can see everything without scrolling. And then if I want to jump to those pieces that people don't go to as often, but sometimes need, like the contact preferences, I can easily jump to that. If I want to see related records, a lot of people in CRM 2013 and after got away from using the related navigation bar because it wasn't easy to get to. You would have to scroll a lot, and so they would either put subgrids on there, which you still can do. And by the way, these subgrids are responsive. So if they're just a single if they're a single column, they'll be displayed as a card like this. If you spread them out in wider, if you had one that has a lot of fields, spread it out wider, and then you'll see more of the full view with the export to Excel button and an easy way to pop it out to the full related records. But I find that the related records are much more accessible. Now I've got a lot of things in this environment. I've got field service, project service, a lot of things, probably more than you would have in your environment. So you can customize this, but the idea is if I pull up, say, the related activity entity, it makes it temporarily a tab right there. So same thing if I want to see the related documents. I can click related and then choose the documents, which I'm not in my environment that has documents, but if I did, it would make it a tab. And that's one of the things I love about it too, is it makes it much more accessible to get to the kind of things that I get to the related records that I need to see. And you can simplify your form, and you don't necessarily have to put as many subgrids on there because you can make it easily available. The recently viewed records and views work across all clients now. With classic UI, you got a different experience if you viewed a record inside of Outlook versus viewing it inside of the web client. Now, whether I pull this up in Outlook or web or in mobile, it will stay on my it will be on my recently viewed items list. And then I have my pinned items as well, which I can pin my recently viewed items that I want to, the ones I go to the most, I can pin them, and then they also become available under the pin menu. So that's just really quick, some of the things that you'll see. I wanted to mention these forms and views. We didn't have to rebuild these when this environment was moved to unified interface. It uses the standard forms and views and dashboards that you use when you are in classic UI. The big change is the move to model-driven apps. So I'm in a model-driven app. When you're in the classic UI, like the default custom app, you get one big application that has everything in it. The way that Dynamics, CDS, and many other applications are going, though, is to the idea of what you might call micro app, taking this big application and cutting it down into smaller experiences. If you've got sales, customer service, marketing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, rather than having, when I log in, having to navigate through the customer service menu and the sales menu to get to what I want, we can make just a focus. See, this app is called Inside Sales. I have an Inside Sales group, and they need an app that only has, accounts, contacts, activities, opportunities, and a couple other things. They don't need cases. They're not licensed for cases. So by doing this, we can take your existing configuration and package it up into smaller experiences, still having the same application, still sharing the same forms and other configuration components, where if you have two groups that use the same form, you don't have to make two different forms. But it lets me create a unique menu or sitemap for each group. It also lets me have just the pieces they need, which in turn will simplify your deployment and your training and increase your user adoption, because it will be less frustrating for users to use the application.
Joel, I'd like to add something real quick there too, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So the other nice thing about that is if you have users that have hybrid needs, then this is a great way to do mashups of the traditional apps too. A specific example is one of my clients was a field sales specialist, where they needed parts of the field service app, such as inventory management, to make sure their trucks were filled up before they went to go sell for the day. And because of that, we made them a very tightly integrated field sales app that had their opportunity and quote management, along with a lot of the stuff they needed to make sure their truck was routed properly for the day that came from field service, without all of the actual work order management, because they didn't need to do any of that. So that hybrid mashup was very easy to do in this modern app environment, where it would have been much more difficult before.
Yeah, I love that idea. So if you have, if that group every day they do a certain job, and then once a month they run certain reports or do other tasks, consider splitting them up into two different apps. Just like on your phone, you've got more than one app. It's not the end of the world, and might be simpler to have it, two different apps. You could have two different links for it. Same thing if you have, the salesperson versus the sales manager, where the salesperson, they need to just do opportunities, where the sales manager has more dashboards. They've got different views. They've got different forms maybe that have some more management visualizations or something like that. Consider giving the sales managers their own app. That way you don't have to have that fight between people saying which link should be first in the menu. Come up with something that people really love to use that's optimized for the experience they need, rather than something where we're making compromises. Okay, so that's the let me share my screen again. And okay, so that was a brief look at the unified interface and some of the benefits. Once you get there, though, it opens the door to a lot of other things that haven't been available to you. Many of these are standard things that come as part of your licenses. Some of them are additional licenses, but are new functionality. And I'm not going to demo each of these, but if you use Teams, there's a standard Teams integration that, once you're on unified interface, can give you visibility for Teams collaboration and documents from within Dynamics, as well as showing Dynamics apps and forms and views from within Teams. Omnichannel for customer service is the next generation of customer service that includes digital messaging, chat, chat bots, and then Power Apps. Your license includes Power Apps, so we can embed them inside Dynamics for wizards, conditional formatting, accessing the 300 plus connectors. I'm not going to go into all these. Running flows from within Dynamics. We know that Flow and Power Automate flows are the future of business automation from within the Power Platform. We can now leverage those first party within Dynamics, and then all the AI enhancements for both sales and customer service, the email engagement, and then just a lot of different things. So again, I'm not recommending you turn all these on day one, but educate yourself about them. Download the Microsoft release notes, not just the latest one, but the last version too, because all those enhancements that were mentioned are primarily on the unified interface. And so just keep that in mind. You may have something, business card scanning as an example. Had a customer that had a lot of people, had salespeople or marketing people that went to trade shows and would pick up all these business cards. And so they were looking at leveraging third-party apps or something to do business card scanning. And then, Microsoft in the last release introduced standard business card scanning in Dynamics 365 for sales. So there may be things in your roadmap that these tools may simplify or replace. We've replaced many a plugin with a Power Automate flow and made it more standard, and made it something that could be then usable and editable by people who are not developers. So now we've gone through kind of the why you should upgrade. We're going to get into the how, more of the specific process, which Wayne is going to cover. Before we do that, Hannah, are there any questions in the queue?
Hey, Joel, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. There actually are a couple of questions. So first question was, do custom activity entities appear in the timeline?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
and
perfect.
you can, if you don't want them to, you can set that as a form level property on the timeline if you say have one that you don't want to show in there.
Okay. And then the second question, does the timeline view allow for you to filter by who created the activity?
I don't believe so. No, it just shows all the related activities. It does give you the ability to show as well. It does show as well the related regarding. So if you've got a parent account and a child account, or if you set up a custom activity roll-up, it will show it on parent accounts. But no, it doesn't. It would filter it based on your security. So if you don't have access to see Wayne's activities, you wouldn't see them. But no, it's not. I don't believe it gives you the ability to filter it by user. That's where I would go to the related activity view, which could let you then select a custom view.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So Wayne.
All right, so today we're going to take a look at the upgrade process for getting everything onto the modern interface, the unified interface. And before I get into this, just in case anybody would like to have more documentation on this and need something to read through as they're going through there, we just posted a blog post with all of this information up on the Hitachi Solutions blog. So this is not the only place you can get this information. I know me, I like a document, so we made sure it's in both places. But anyway, first thing we'll want to take a look at is making sure you actually are telling your users this is happening. Communication plan and a training plan for this new interface, especially if you have any planning around actually making updates to your processes, is going to be key. There is a lot of improvements that Joel showed that really can help user adoption and really help user experience, but changing these things without letting them know is a recipe for failure. So make sure that you've got this in place, that you know that they know it, that they're excited about it. Maybe even start getting some feedback on things they'd like to improve and change, and use an excuse to go ahead and change things up since you got to upgrade anyway. Just make sure they know and make sure they're involved. It's huge. But beyond that, let's go into some of the more technical pieces here. And after we go through this slide, I'll actually pull up the browser and show some of these screens so we can ground this all in reality too. Because I know this is just kind of a running list here. But as Joel mentioned, you want to go to that Run One apps, powerapps.com to manage your upgrade schedule. And since Joel mentioned that, I'll just wait till the end to show what it looks like. But basically, that's where you're going to make sure you know when your upgrade is planned and whether or not it's realistic within the time frame you need to actually get your changes and updates done, and delayed if you need to. So the next thing we're going to do is Microsoft has released a solution checker for the unified interface. And this solution checker is an excellent way to make sure that any changes you've made to your system can be moved forward. And I'll show you how to get to that and what it looks like when it's doing its job here soon as well. When we get through the solution checker, it's going to provide a report back that's basically going to show you all of the issues it thinks you're going to have based on which solution you pick and what severity there is. Some of them are just going to be informational, like, hey, this is probably not going to look right when you get there, or this may be something you take a look at, but then it'll give you severity levels of low, medium, and high. You'll absolutely need to take a look at your medium highs and address them in some form or fashion, and lows you'll probably want to remove if at all possible. So then once that happens, that's when you're actually going to be able to put together your remediation plan, figure out what JavaScript needs to be rebuilt, what plugins might have to be redone, any custom actions that may no longer be supported, anything that is going to require a change to upgrade, you'll want to address. And once you've gotten that, then you'll also probably want to go analyze all of those new feature improvements that Joel mentioned and see if any of your custom plugins, JavaScript logic, anything like that can be replaced with out-of-the-box logic now. Because there are so many expanded capabilities with process, there's a whole lot that doesn't have to be done with custom development anymore. Even just going and looking at Power Automate, which used to be called Flow, that has a lot of intra-platform and cross-platform functionality that just doesn't easily exist within workflow, especially if you're talking about things like if you have approval flows, things like that you've built custom, you'll want to look at Power Automate because it does all of that stuff with either no code or at least a low code environment. So a very easy transition, relatively speaking. So then once you've determined what you absolutely have to upgrade and what you cannot replace with out-of-the-box processes anymore, of course, you're going to want to actually and redevelop all that JavaScript, rewrite all that code to the new APIs, and then push it out there. So once you've got all that in your development environment, you're going to want to go ahead and build an app focused on your users that are going to see this, which again, Joel mentioned is very useful now. You can actually make highly granular apps to the users that need to see them. I definitely recommend doing this. Slightly higher administrative overhead on your all's part to manage those, but it is a vast, vast improvement on the productivity of the users, and they'll generally very much appreciate that once they see that they only have like the 3 places they need to go as opposed to the 20 that's out of there by default. Then once you've got all that, make sure that you also have plans to migrate away from the old Outlook FAT plugin if you all are still using it. Since it does go away as well, you want to make sure that you're using the Outlook app. And in the blog post I mentioned, we do have links to details about how to deploy that app. Since it's not really technically part of this upgrade process, I'll let the links in there explain for themselves. Once all you've got this done in your development environment, you're going to want to push it to an environment that you can upgrade for testing. So user acceptance testing, perhaps even the development environment itself, just somewhere you want to make sure that you go ahead and have that environment be your upgraded environment to test all of this in. Because of course you need to make sure you verify everything works like you want it to. And ideally you'll want your users to test and verify it too. Maybe even get a little bit of that feedback loop where they can say, hey, that's technically what we asked for, but in the new UI, it's kind of wonky. Can we clean that up? Because, I mean, it's new UI. They probably don't even know what they want until they put their hands on it. So give them that little last bit of feedback loop. Make sure that they know that they're being listened to. And that goes back all the way to step 1, getting that communication plan. But then once you've got all that in place, the users are happy with what they see and they've accepted that the changes are going to be good, then your schedule for that you did in step 2 should be ready to go. So with that, I'd like to show a couple of the pages that you can take a look at before we go to the next slide, last slide here for me. And how do I take control to do that?
I can give you, oh, there you go.
Excellent. Okay, and do you all see my screen now? And more importantly, do you only see one screen?
Yes, I see.
Okay, excellent. So first off here, this is just me logged into the apps. And just in case you haven't noticed this before, any given app that still is on the legacy interface will say web at the bottom here. And all the modern ones that you might already have from Microsoft will say unified interface. So this is just a quick view to see what's being used, what's out there that you still have in the wild. Just a good point. And of course, you know, Microsoft's going to be pinging you here, letting you know that, hey, stuff's going on. But let's actually go into some of this process. So this right here is the Unified Interface Transition Portal. This is the place where Joel was talking about being able to go to and initiate all this. I've already logged in and everything. And so what I need to do now is just go to my environments. Once we're in the environments here, this is where we're going to see all of the environments, what their status is, what their schedule is, anything else we're going to need to actually work on it. So we can see here, a couple of them have already been transitioned. We've got a couple that are scheduled to go in the future, or this one's not even scheduled yet, but we can see what's ready to go and what's not. And if we actually click in here, we'll get a lot more details about what the environment is, what details it has, and whether or not it's been rescheduled. And I don't have the button here right now, but under normal circumstances, you would have a button right here in the upper right that would say reschedule request if there was the opportunity to reschedule. So that is very quickly what it looks like when you're going through and managing your environments. Very straightforward, very easy once you're here. So no muss, no fuss. There's your date, there's your environment. Is it ready? Yes or no? Not too difficult. But if we go over to the Power Apps Manager, this is where things get a little bit fancier because you may not have seen these screens yet either as an administrator. If you have been using the traditional Dynamics administration screens, solution management screens, all of the old style, 2011 to 2015 style management screens, this Power Apps screen might be completely new to you. And if it is, you're going to see that there's a lot of stuff in here that's really going to be familiar to you, just laid out differently. The big piece is going to be under solutions here, but just so you know, there's also a complete entity management piece here that's kind of like working in your default solution in Dynamics. Not going to dig into that right now because it's not the focus of there, but I just want you to be aware that this should look familiar. So I'm going to jump into the solutions area here, and this is just like the solutions area you have inside the classic Dynamics interface, to the point that it even has a button that says switch to classic if you're more comfortable working in it. I'm going to collapse this out a little bit so we can see more here. So in here, with all these solutions, you can sort them exactly like you would before. I like to filter to unmanaged since that's what we're going to care about right now. Filter by unmanaged. And so here we see we've got a bunch of unmanaged. And we see over here on the right, I've got solution check. This means that I've actually already used the solution checker on this solution to see what the issues are. So to actually run it though, all I need to do is select one of these, and then I can run the solution checker from up on the bar or from the ellipsis, whichever way you prefer. I'm not going to waste the time running it right now because it can take a little while, especially if you have an extensive amount of customizations. But I will say something that you'll definitely want to be aware of is if you run this on the default solution, the one that has everything inside of it, it's probably going to take a very long time, and there's even a chance it might time out and fail. So if you are already using solution management to do all of your unmanaged solutions, great. Just check that solution to start. But if you aren't, I would strongly recommend creating a solution with just all of the stuff that you've changed in Dynamics and run the solution checker against that. It's a little bit of extra work, but it'll save you a lot of time on the solution checker run. So once we've got it run, this is where you can either view the results or download them to work with them in a spreadsheet. I'm just going to view them because I only have a couple of them here. Since I have a very simple solution I was managing here, we see that we do have a very important issue here. I've got an orphan form element. So this is something I need to go clean up. I need to go clean up my case configuration here and basically just make sure the form's working right. So I'm lucky. I don't have any custom code here. I don't have any JavaScript here that's going to throw issues, so I don't have to redevelop anything. You can see from here what it is that's going on. So that is the solution checker as well. Since we're going to take a look at it here in a second, and I've already got my screen shared, I'll also point out that there's two pieces of consideration that you'll want to take a look at as we go forward. Now I've managed over to the classic Dynamics Administration Center. This is the one you can get from the Office Admin area. But the reason I brought this up is because if you go to your Solutions area, there we go. And you have a field service or project service installed, you're going to see that there should be an upgrade available now if you're on version 7. something or older. So version 8 for field service and version 3 for project service is where the transition happened to support the unified interface for these add-ons from Microsoft. So if you use either one of these or if you had them installed in your environments, you want to make sure that you're on at least version 8 when you do this transition. Because if you're not, they're not going to work correctly. So that's a very important migration to happen. And you can technically run this upgrade before you do the big transition if you need to check and make sure that any custom forms you add with field service and project service work properly. So just be aware that that upgrade will have to happen. The other one I wanted to mention is we talked about custom controls and everything Power Apps controls. There's a great third-party site here called PCF Gallery that shows you and allows you to download and install all kinds of custom controls you can now use in Dynamics with the unified interface. So this is a great way to really help add some visibility and visualizations and ease of use to your system for your users to see. And I like it because this is all community submitted. We even have some from our own very own Hitachi experts here, like where is he? There's Andrew Potenko here. So I just really like this site. It is third-party managed, so just be aware this is not an official Microsoft site. It's community-driven, and I think it's a great resource to find some enhancements to functionality as you're going through here to look for ways to make sure users have a better experience with this transition. But with that, oops, I did not mean to show you all my stuff. If we want to go back to the PowerPoint, then I'll go to the next panel.
Yeah, if you can hit on the panels, hit change presenter and switch it back to me.
And there it goes.
All right. So I'm gonna we'll pick up, and I've already talked through several considerations. The next section is going to cover some additional considerations you might want to make when making the move.
All right. So as mentioned, field service and project service require upgrades as well if you're on version 7 or version 2 respectively. But related to that, any other ISVs that you all are using, be that click dimensions, MSCRM add-ons, any other ISV tool managed solution that's come from somebody else, verify that you're on a version that supports the unified interface. That might be as simple as just calling them or emailing them, or they might even say in the solution whether or not it's current to unified interface, but make sure you get those updates too. That could be a very big impact on your overall upgrade. Very much related to that too is no system really stands alone these days, so check your integrations as well. If you're using integrations that are using legacy APIs to communicate with Dynamics, there's a decent chance that they might break when you go through this upgrade process. So make sure that they're using a modern API of some sort to communicate with Dynamics so you don't lose all that integration process. And if you are going to break some of that, if you have some lightweight integrations, seriously consider migrating them over to Flow, to Power Automate, because Power Automate has a lot of real good power around managing information between systems on a relatively lightweight scale. Obviously, you wouldn't want to use it as a full enterprise migrator, but if you're just dumping a couple of things over to like your marketing tool, that might be something to seriously consider. And while you're at it, another thing to consider is if you're already going through a major transition and it looks like you're going to be updating a lot of your UIs and processes anyway, very seriously consider looking at all your workflows, your native workflows, and also migrating them over to a Power Automate and turning them into flows themselves. So Microsoft is planning on retiring the traditional workflow sometime in the relatively near future. So it would not be a bad idea to go ahead and make that transition now so you don't have to make that transition later. And related to that, if you have any web resources or other kinds of visual customizations, then considering making them into Power Apps components, either pre-built ones, as we just saw with the with that website, or to make your own, which we have the link right here. It would be a very good idea to take a look at that, because also if you migrate over to them, then they work much better on mobile. They will work at all at mobile, depending on what kind of a web resource you have. They're much more consistent. They're solution managed. It's a very nice way to handle anything you've got related to your old customizations. So if we're modernizing anyway, you might as well modernize everything.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Wayne. One thing to note as well that kind of differentiates this from other upgrades or migrations in the past, such as way back when we went from 2011 to 2013, when they changed the rendering engine over time. At those times, it was kind of a breaking change, meaning there was no way to go back. And so the nice thing about this is it's not that way. It's not that we have to like lay out new forms or views or anything like that. It's not like once you upgrade your form, you can't go back. The interesting thing about this is before your environment gets transitioned to unified interface only, you can build your model-driven app and be testing your stuff in unified interface while the rest of your users are still in classic UI using the same forms. Now, if you move things around on the form, it's going to change their experience, but it's not like you're making a non-reversible change. So that's the recommendation is, as part of this process, create a model-driven app, test it out, see what needs to be updated, make those changes. And once you get everybody moved over to unified interface, even before you go to your transition date, there's a setting inside the Power Platform Admin Center that you can turn on unified interface only. I should mention as well, anybody who's set up a new environment for the last 6 months plus already has this experience, because if you've installed a trial lately, or if you've installed your environment, or you've done your implementation in the last year, you would have done that on unified interface. It wouldn't have been on classic UI. So in there's really should be nothing that should affect you. It's for people who are still using the classic user interface, still using the classic Outlook client. That's what we're talking about, and where you can start today and start building and testing your model-driven app for unified interface. You do that, and we have a offer to help you with that. This is something we've helped a number of our customers make this move already, and the first thing is in the process Wayne talked about is identifying what you have that needs to be updated, in planning out what the experience looks like. And that's why we have this 2-day unified interface readiness assessment, which is working with one of our architects to kind of inventory what you have, review existing configuration, and then build a plan and a roadmap for how you safely make the move to unified interface, and what functionality we're going to take advantage of, including some of those additional things. If you want to get into more of, how do we plan for dynamics marketing, or how do we plan for AI for sales, or things like that. This is going to be the first step, and something that you have to do within a certain amount of time. And the deliverable of this is much more detailed plan, taking what we learn as part of that two-day effort, and putting together a detailed transition plan that includes the recommendation and an actionable roadmap. And some of our clients have taken that and have done the bulk of the work themselves. Others have worked with us and had us help them build that model-driven app and test it. And during that time, we can also help you identify any of our Hitachi Solutions industry or IP solutions where there might be some updates for that, to better support unified interface. We can provide that information and put you in touch with the updates to those solutions. So that's what, and there's again a copy of this in the handouts if you want to download it and learn more about that. Hannah, do we have any more questions?
Joel, yes, we do have a couple more. One was regarding, let's see, the UCI upgrade process for USD, if we
Yes.
have any insights on that.
We have used it, and it's I know it was helpful. That's specific to identifying if there are any issues, with USD, Unified Service Desk, specific to unified interface. You will want to, if you're still on an older version of USD, you'll want to update your USD, because you'll need, is it 4.1, I believe, that introduces support for unified interface, along with support for non-IE browsers, which makes your performance a lot better. So yes, we have used that. If you have any specific questions about that, please send them my way and I can get you answers on them.
Great. And let's see, let's do one more. There are a few others, just so that everyone knows we will get in touch with everyone, but while we're still online, one other question. When you were talking about CRM workflows that will be replaced by Flow, or which is now called Power Automate, is there an impact on Logic apps?
Actually, Flow is Flow is Logic apps. It's basically the more user-friendly, non-developer version of Logic apps, to the point that if you have a flow that needs some customization, you can promote it to a Logic app so a developer can work on it. So there's no real impact. If you're using Logic apps, more power to you. You're basically already future-proofed.
And here's the other consideration. If you use Logic apps, which I would recommend using Logic apps instead of Flow, if it's more of a large integration or something like that, because it is more of a developer tool. But if it's things that are more workflow grade or even plugin grade, one of the benefits of using Flow is you basically, under the new licensing for Dynamics, you have, as long as the Flow uses Common Data Service or Dynamics, you have unlimited flow runs. So there's a cost benefit to using Flow for those types of jobs where Flow is a good fit, because with the logic apps, you're going to pay per run. It's not a ton of money, but it's basically use what you're licensed for, and that's why many of our customers that use logic apps also use Flow, because again, and you also have some things that Flow can do that logic apps can't do. The new RPA, robotic process automation, business process flow, a number of other things that they're the same platform, but certain things like I don't have the ability to run logic app on selected records like I can with Flow. So use the right tool for the job.
Great. It looks like we maybe have one more on the subject of Flow. For those having an issue with trigger on field change and not getting the record to change. That.
Okay.
So
we'd be glad to look at that with you. Wayne, what were you saying?
just mentioning that there are a couple of different versions of the Flow reach out to Dynamics, one of which explicitly supports field change and the other one only supports full updates. So that is something you might want to make sure as you're looking at the most modern CDS connection for Dynamics and not the old one branded as Dynamics 365. That will be a world of difference if you're trying to do field updates.
And you also, for custom entities, you have to have what's the change? What's the setting you have to have turned on the entity?
I'd have to go look it up.
It's like change control. What is that thing called? I can't think of it. But yeah, there's certain things you have to have set on the entity. So yeah, I agree. Make sure you're using the Common Data Service connector. Especially make it even more confusing. There's two Common Data Service connectors. But if you use the native connector, what's known as the Common Data Service Current Environment connector, and you have if it's a custom entity, you have things turned on. It will trigger. But again, if you're having problems, we're glad to dig into that with you. Change tracking.
There we go. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, for the questions that we did not get to, we will get back with you on some direct follow-ups as well as some additional information, and we will send out a copy of this recording. As Joel mentioned, the presentation is in the handouts as well, so you can have a copy of these slides, and if you have any additional questions that you think of, please reach out to us, but we will send out an email with a copy of the recording that you can reply to directly as well. And thanks everyone for their time. Give everybody a few minutes back, and any closing words from Joel or Wayne?
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us and thanks for your questions. Let me just switch over back over to our contact information. If you do want to reach out to either one of us, we have our email address there. Glad to hear from you and any additional follow-up questions you might have.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon, and looking forward to talking with you soon.